Hey everybody, this is Ryan Daniel Moran, and in case you didn't know, you're listening to Freedom Fastlane. You know, almost every entrepreneur that I know has this fear that one day everything that they've built is going to come crashing down around them. And most of the time, that's a really silly fear. But for my guest today, it actually happened. Today, Matt Theriault is going to be sharing how he went from six figures a month to $7 an hour. Now, I'm sharing this story with you today because Matt didn't stay at $7 an hour. In fact, he used his lessons that he learned from that major setback and built something that was way bigger than what he was doing before. And it taught Matt the importance of passive income. And so after we talk about Matt's story, he and I are going to be talking about passive income and how Matt built his passive income through real estate. We also talk about something really interesting. We talk about how it really takes less effort and less passive income than most people think to live a life full of freedom. And we'll be talking about that concept, and we'll be talking about the strategies that Matt used, specifically in real estate, in order to achieve that dream. So enjoy today's call with Matt Theriault. Hey gang, this is Ryan Daniel Moran, and you're listening to Freedom Fastlane. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Matt Theriault. Matt, thanks for hanging out with us at Freedom Fastlane.
Oh, you bet, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Matt, you're the author, if you will, of a very successful podcast, Your Do-Over, which takes people from basically starting over to incredibly awesome success stories. But you have an unbelievable story of being successful and then losing it all and then having to go in a completely different direction. And I'd like you to kick things off by sharing that story with Freedom Fastlane.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, Ryan, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent the next 15 years of my life in the music business, pursuing my passion, living my dream. And, you know, I'd make music and I'd market it and sell it. And it just created a wonderful lifestyle. And each year got better than the previous and had an amazing momentum going into my early 30s. And then this thing called the digital download came along and basically wiped me out, as well as, you know, probably 50 to 60% of the music industry out there. And I was in a position where I had to learn something brand new. And because I didn't have a plan B, I didn't know what I was going to do. There's only one thing I knew how to do. There's only one thing I was good at. And, you know, that took me to a place where I was bagging groceries while I was trying to figure that part out.
Literally bagging groceries.
Literally. For about 6 months, I was the paper or plastic guy for sure.
But Matt, you were incredibly successful in your first career, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think so. No one probably would ever heard of me. I was very much a niche part of music. We were an underground hip-hop label. But we did have major label distribution, and I had 3 employees. And, you know, we sold 20, 30,000 units every time we came out with something. And that doesn't sound like much in the world of music. But when you only have 3 employees and most of all of your employees are the ones that are making the music too, it's a really, really high profit margin. So we didn't have to sell a whole lot to be successful.
But my understanding is you went from 6 figures to $7 an hour.
An hour. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, I had a very proven system, a proven formula for selling my releases. And we came out with a release every single month. And that formula worked really well for those last 2 or 3 years. And when it started to not work as effectively, I just kept on throwing more and more money at it, trying to get that same formula to work and same formula to work. And where I ran it into the ground to the point where, you know, it was just unrecoverable.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I've done similar things in my old businesses. If something worked for a few years, and when the market changes, you can either follow the market or you can be insistent that you're correct and the market is wrong and throw a lot of money at it. And I've made that mistake myself.
Yeah, it was just, you know, it was my real first, you know, I was young. I was all through my 20s. It was my only real experience as an entrepreneur. And what I was doing worked right away. And so I was like, okay, if it works, let's just do more and have it work more. And this thing of the internet wasn't even thought of. No one knew how it was going to impact the world. And certainly no one knew how it was going to impact and turn the music industry upside down.
So Matt, what was that like when you went from being successful in your first career to, dare I say, bottom of the barrel? What was going on in your head? Were you going through self-defeat, or was your fire even that much greater?
Self-defeat was certainly something that was there. I was felt very sorry for myself, and at age 34, and you're sitting there at the end bagging groceries, and you're taking your lunch breaks with 16, 17 year olds.
Wow.
I'm kind of like, wow, now what? Because I didn't finish college, and when I was in the Marine Corps, I didn't really have a skill that was transferable to the civilian world. And so I didn't know how to do anything else. So I didn't know what my choices were. Like most people, when they hit that point, they're thinking they have to go back to college. And I remember there was one day, Ryan, it was about, I don't know, I've been there about 4 or 5 months, and I graduated to the actual checkout clerk. So I got a nice little raise to $9 an hour, whatever it was. And I remember there was a typical, if you were going to draw a picture of a soccer mom, a typical affluent soccer mom came through my line, and just had the little exercise outfit on, and was just manicured to the T, and the hair was right, the nails were right, and she had her kids with her, and everything was looking perfect for her as far as her life looked, at least from my point of view. And I remember when she pulled out her credit card to pay for the groceries, a little her ATM receipt fell out onto the little counter. And I couldn't help but sneak a glance, and I saw it, and the balance was $256,000. This was in her checking account. And the reason that number was significant was that was the highest number. That was like my number that I was chasing, because that was the highest amount I'd ever had in my own checking account when I was in the music business.
You had $256,000 when you were in business.
Yes.
And then you went to $7 an hour. Wow.
Correct. And so just that moment was like, how, I don't know if this was on purpose or what, but that was the exact amount that I'd had at my peak in the music business of just fluent, having liquid cash. And felt nauseous. I had to excuse myself. I told my boss, I'm taking a break. You're going to have to finish up here. I went out to my car and tried to recoup myself and gather myself, and was crying. And I was just like, okay, I'm way better than this. I'm never going to have this again. I'm never going to experience this again unless I actually get up and do something. Because obviously I've been here for 4 or 5 months asking friends and family for help and direction, and no one's doing it for me. I found some good shoulders to cry on, but at the end of the day, no one was actually going to do what I needed to have happen. And so I had to figure out, on my own, what I was going to do to recreate the lifestyle that I'd become so accustomed to.
And was that difficult for you? Because as an entrepreneur, you had done it once before, and we tend to think that us as entrepreneurs are natural go-getters. We naturally take life by the horns and have that experience. And out of my own curiosity, I'm very interested in why at a peak of your music business, you didn't have contacts or other avenues that could have taken you down other directions rather than going back to $7 an hour bagging groceries.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ryan, at the time when I decided that I had to go a different direction was at a time where there was no business model in the music industry. The year I did this, Sony Music had laid off 10,000 people. Universal Music had laid off 10,000 people. And then like 3 months later, Sony did it all over again, laid off another 10,000 people. It looked like the end of the world was coming as far as music was concerned. And, Napster was thriving. iTunes wasn't even thought of yet. And because we were in an underground form of music, and it didn't matter whether it was underground hip hop like us or underground dance or underground rock music, that audience, the underground audience, embraced that digital download way before general population did. And, that impacted us small little labels much quicker. And then when we started to see the major labels, running for the hills basically, or doing massive cuts, then we're just kind of like, well, gosh, if they can't do it, and no one, and the Virgin Records is going out of business, and Tower Records is going out of business. All the major music stores were going out of business, filing bankruptcy. They're all returning their product in massive quantity, looking for credit. And so it was like a tough time to where, I don't know if I wanted to be in music, because the people that I knew in music didn't know what they were going to do with their future. So there wasn't a whole lot of people to look to for help at that time.
Matt, I'm fascinated by this because I think most entrepreneurs at some point in their careers face this voice in their head that says, what happens if you lose it all? And the the proverbial fear is, we're going to end up having to move back home, or you end up working at Walmart or whatever it is if we'll lose it all. Even the most successful people that I know have confessed at some point having a voice in their head that is like, if this project doesn't go well, I'm going to lose everything that I have, and I'm going to have to sell the house and the car, and I'm going to move back to Oregon with my mom and work at Walmart forever.
Right.
But I always say that never happens. And then I met Matt Terrio, who actually went to bagging groceries. But you didn't stay there. You had this moment where you're like, all right, it's time to make some changes.
Yep. I had a few events within the next few days that really kind of just changed everything for me. And when I went back to off of that break out from the parking lot and went back in and to check back in and start working again, my manager had pulled me aside and he just kind of asked me what was wrong and what happened. And so I basically just told him the whole story I just told you right now. And he had said, Matt, if you really want your life back, if you really want to get into that type of money again, you really need to look at income real estate. And then he kind of shared with me of what he owned. I mean, he'd been a manager there for 30 years at this Ralph's, but he had managed to buy several single family residences that he had his income property. He had a couple apartment buildings, and he said, this is my retirement, and this is how I've been able to do it. And I don't need this job. I could quit today, and blah, blah, blah. And just went on and on and on about the security and the freedom and the comfort that he had felt at that time. And he says, if you want to do it, he actually said the words that real estate is the last frontier where the average person has a shot at real wealth. And I was just like, okay, if this is the last frontier, and, certainly there's exceptions, but just for the average person, it takes a moderate amount of education and then just taking some action, some proven action that's worked for people for centuries.
This is, of course, before the internet, which I believe to be a new frontier, and there's always a new frontier. But real estate has always kind of been around as available to even somebody bagging groceries.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean when I say average person. I mean, you have your exceptional people that go out and are entrepreneurs and start business and stuff like that. But even you know how the failure rate is there. It's so significant.
I would disagree with you, but go on, Matt.
Okay. Well, when you look at so I went and did some research that night. And I looked at, I started just Googling real estate investing, real estate education, how to invest in real estate, stuff like that. And I actually stumbled across an aunt that I had in my family that I hadn't talked to for a while. And she, just 2 cities over, she'd been the #1 real estate agent for the last 20 years in this city, just 2 cities over. And so that's where I kind of looked, and I made an appointment with her and met with her the next day. And gosh, I guess within 48 hours, I was on the road to getting my real estate agent license. And after about 4 years of that, realized that, this is not where the wealth is. I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk. It's not as a real estate agent. I should have chosen the path of being a real estate investor.
You went back to just having a higher paying job then.
Yep. I made good money. I got rookie of the year my first year, and I did better each year after that. But I was working probably 70 to 80 hours a week. Don't even remember what a weekend was like. And I had a couple clients there at the end of that term of, they were great clients. They gave me business over and over and over again. I was working with like 3 or 4 people. And I started to just kind of realize, like, when we would show up to our meetings and I'm in a suit and tie and they're in jeans and a t-shirt, and I'm like, they're just signing. I have all their papers ready for them to sign. They sign the papers and then they take off for the weekend. And I'm stuck there with the paperwork and holding their houses open. And I'm looking at the final, the closing statements, and I'm like, okay, yeah, they're being really generous. They're giving me my full 3% or my full 6%, but they're walking away with 25-30% profit. Yeah. And I was like, that's where I need to be.
Yeah.
And,
so Matt, I want to go into the specific things that you learned in real estate here in a second, but I want to address this point in which you had basically lost everything. You were starting to rebuild everything. And you now have this podcast about starting over, about your do-over. Mm-hmm. I'd like for you to address for a minute the parallels that you've seen a lot of people take that have lost things and then regained it back. What mindsets and what strategies have you seen that are common among people who are resilient enough to earn it all back after they've lost something?
What's common? Well, I certainly took note of all the mistakes I felt I had made the first time around. And, the famous insanity quote, you do the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same result. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change these things. And what I've noticed, and taking pages out of successful people's books, is one, I thought I never really had a mentor. I never had a role model. So that was kind of where I started. I said, okay, I got to find a role model that's doing what I want to do, that has what I want to have, who's, the person that I respect and who I want to be. And then the second part was to be intentional and on creating an environment of like-minded people, which was another huge, huge thing, because there is not another entrepreneur in my whole family. I was, the lone ranger in that respect. They're all civil workers, and I come from a lot of policemen and firemen in my family. And so I made sure I got involved in real estate investing communities, people of like mind. And I think that would be applicable to whatever your pursuit would be. And those two things made the biggest probably difference of mine. And then I got around people who were really producing, not people that were just talking. And I got to see what actual work looked like. And then all I had to do was really just mimic that. And that's where I got started. And then the next part was recognizing that you don't have to do it all yourself. Because in the music business, I was a one-man band. I did everything. I mean, I was even I was producing the music. I was going out and finding the talent. I was designing the album covers. I was setting up the marketing plan. I was interacting with our distributor. I would go out to the stores to make sure the placement was right. I mean, I did everything. And then when I started to get into real estate, I realized that I didn't have to do everything. I could delegate. And so with the environment and a role model and learning to delegate and accepting that and embracing that, that's what I noticed that other people that were very successful were doing. So I did the exact same thing, and I think I got a fairly similar result.
You started doing this at a time when the internet was fairly in its infant stages. And today, both of those things, that association piece of the equation of being around people who are like-minded, you can find them at meetups, you can find them on forums, you can go to YouTube and listen to Tony Robbins or Robert Kiyosaki anytime you want. And that piece is more available to us now than it's ever been. And in the same token, that delegating piece is easier than it's ever been before, but it wasn't available to you at the time. But now you can outsource overseas, you can outsource to people who work from home, because we have this thing called the internet now. We have an interview here at the Freedom Fastlane podcast with Chris Ducker, who full-time works with people in the Philippines and outsources everything there and helps people connect with virtual assistants. And so
one of my full-time assistants came from Chris's service.
Oh, yeah? Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is more available to us now than it's ever been before, both outsourcing and associating with people. And I found that you're right about what you said about surrounding yourself with people who have achieved what you wanted to achieve, no matter what that is, whether it's real estate or in my industry of internet marketing. I've seen whole businesses be launched and successful just a result of people going to conferences and meeting, or people going to real estate conventions and doing a deal, or whatever it is. That association piece is so important to your do-over, you achieving the result that you want.
Indeed.
So Matt, why don't you go into the specific strategies then that took you from that place of really not knowing where you're going to go next, or being frustrated working 80 hours a week, to the results and the success that you have now?
Sure. There was a big shift in my actual mindset that really launched it when I was making that transition from real estate agent to real estate investor. And you had mentioned just a few minutes ago the name Robert Kiyosaki, and I think so many of us have read that book. And it is a life changer. It certainly can scramble your brain and make you certifiably unemployable for sure. But one of the things that Kiyosaki, his book has been criticized for, it was really good on theory, but it kind of lacked on the how-to part. And but that's okay. It was enough of a shift of my mindset that I had to go out and find the how-to part. But that big shift was, when I was in the music business, and even for a good portion of my time as a real estate agent, not probably the whole portion, was I was really focused on making money, working hard, making money, saving that money, and reinvesting it to make more money. It's just make money. And where the shift really happened for me is when from that book, and it was the first time I ever really heard the phrase passive income, is where I stopped focusing on making money and started focusing on making streams of money. And it's just that one little word is the difference between the two mindsets. But when you get up and go to work every day with those two different mindsets, your activities and your actions and your intentions are completely different.
Completely.
They're just polar opposites. And I started to do the math, and I think it might have been in Rich Dad Poor Dad or the 4 Hour Work, or not 4 Hour Work Week, the Cash Flow Quadrant, where he talked about, you define yourselves by months of the day, like how rich you are. You 15 days rich, 20 days rich, 30 days rich. And that was where you just need to get your passive income to exceed your expenses. So if you didn't work, how many days of the month could you survive? And that was just such a simple way of putting it that I was like, okay, all I have to do is make it to 30 days. That's all I got to do is make it to 30 days, because the next day I get to start all over again.
Right.
So that was a very different way of doing it. I started doing the math, and I was like, wow, okay, I could probably do this in 2, 3, 4 years. But if I have that other mindset where I'm just make money, that's going to take me 40 years.
Yeah.
And then it's, and then it's like, and what happened if you work 40 years and you don't make it?
Yeah.
Then what?
That's the fear that everybody has, right?
Yeah.
Is that they're going to run out of time.
Then you got to go to the passive income thing anyway, because you don't have enough time to start all over again and do it the other way.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I set my mind on. I set my intentions on. So I focused on just squishing my expenses down as low as I could, as became very much of a minimalist, and then focused on acquiring assets. And that came in the form of rental property.
So you did it with rental property. You mentioned the 4 Hour Work Week accidentally. It talks about internet businesses or other side businesses, which I know very well. I don't know the real estate side as well, although I am a bit of a novice investor. I have a handful of income producing properties. So I want to hear your strategy. You became free following a specific strategy. And I love how you put it. You just needed to get to 30 days of passive income, and then you were home free at that point, rather than having to save $1 million or whatever it was so that you had enough money to outlast your life.
Right.
So I want to hear about your strategy, and I want to know how long it took in order to get to that day 30 point.
Sure. Okay, so once I had the mindset shift, I'll start there, because that's where the strategy really kicked in. Was I had just come off of about a year of flipping short sales, because the country was full of them, and the bank regulations didn't even know what they were really loose then as far as they handled them. So I was flipping these properties and making a lot of money, but I wasn't holding anything. So I still had a job. But I was making good money, but I still had a job. Then I started the same leads I was generating. So my actual strategies, I would send out direct mail, and I specifically used this yellow letter that has generated all my business since then. That's what I teach today now too. But I'd send it to absentee owners, people that own properties but didn't live in the properties, and I'd send it to pre-foreclosures. And I would send there, it was a very simple letter. It was a yellow piece of paper in red ink. I'd say, "Hi, my name is Matt. My girlfriend and I would like to buy your house. Please call me at blah, 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 blah." Very simple. And that right there, I think direct mail is like the industry standards. You get a 1 or 2% return rate. And we got about a 15 to 16% return rate on that yellow letter. And I would just look they would call, and I would have 3 basic questions that would kind of flush out the motivation to see if there's an actual motivation there. And if there was a motivated seller on the other line that was willing to trade some equity for peace of mind, then I'd make an appointment, and we'd put a structure in place where it took very little to any money out of my own pocket. And a lot of that was where there was a subject to taking the property subject to the existing financing, where we left the loan in place, and I just took over the payments and gave them a few bucks to get to their next destination, or an actual seller financing structure. And I started looking for those specifically and started to build a passive income stream for myself.
So you held on to them and then you rented them out?
Yep, yep. And so I did I don't know, probably a half a dozen of those in Southern California. And then I had a friend who was doing the same thing, and he had three multifamily units in Memphis, Tennessee, that he had under contract, but he only had enough money to close on two of them. So he wholesaled that third property to me. I went out and got a private loan from somebody, made them a partner. And when I went to Memphis to go and conduct my due diligence on the property, a whole new world opened up, and this is where my life really changed. Was where I didn't know they had properties for 40, 50, $60,000 anywhere. I'm in Southern California, and our median at the time was probably about 350, the median. And all of a sudden I found these houses that were selling for 50 grand after repair, after you fixed them up, and they'd rent for $700-800. Mm-hmm. And you do that calculation on the most conservative side of things, you're getting a 15, 16, 17% cash on cash return with no debt on the property.
Right.
And I was just like, wow. So I had a bunch of friends and family and friends of friends and family of family and all the combinations of here in Southern California that had nowhere to put their money. And I had a lot of people that they weren't wealthy people, but people had 40, 50, 60 grand, maybe 100 grand on the sidelines sitting in a bank account getting 1%. And so I started helping them build their portfolios as well. And that would raise the money for me to continue to build mine. So
in that way, you were able to enter in deals with no money out of your own pocket, but
exactly.
You're still building your passive cash flow.
Exactly.
I want to address something that comes up a lot when I hear people talk about this, and that's that you can't get deals like that anymore. And as I'm sitting here, it's late 2013. Mm-hmm. My last real estate deal was 3 months ago. I live currently in Austin, Texas, but my home, where I'm from, is Cleveland, Ohio, and I bought my last property in Cleveland, Ohio for $40,000 cash, and it rents for $950 a month. So almost the exact same numbers that you talked about when you started finding out about this process. Those deals are still everywhere, all over the country, depending on the market that you're in.
Indeed. I mean, the last 15 properties I picked up were in Cleveland, Ohio.
All right.
And we did 100
Stop
of these.
Stop taking all my deals, Matt.
Cleveland's a great market right now. The city's really, I don't know, it's building up. I don't know what it was before I got there. I just made my first trip there about a month ago. We did 100 of these deals in 2012. We probably doubled that in 2013. And I think we'll probably double it again in 2014. And we're in Memphis, we're in St. Louis, Kansas City, Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and we're going into Indianapolis, we're going to Pittsburgh, and Illinois.
All right, so those types of deals are everywhere, and I'm guessing that you specialize then in that level of housing, and you rent them for that level that you mentioned, mm-hmm. And then you split the cash flow with your company and the people who have invested in them?
No, actually, two different ways we do it. We can pull together 3 or 4 investors, and we create an LLC, and we buy a bunch of properties on behalf of the LLC, and then I'll manage the LLC for them. So it's a real passive income for them. I deal with a lot of busy professionals, your doctors, lawyers, small business owners that want to invest in real estate. They just don't have the time to do it. So that's one structure where we'll actually do the investing for them. And then we have others that, they might have 50, 60 grand. They want a house. So what we do is we go acquire the property, we fix it up, we put the tenant in place, we coordinate the management, and we sell it to them as a cash flowing asset.
Got it.
And then the profits from those two models is what I use to build my own portfolio.
Your own passive cash flow portfolio, you mean?
Correct. So all of my properties are right next to all of my clients' properties. We're all in the same city, in the same town, and now we've built up such a volume where we represent such a significant part of our property managers' portfolios that we get priority treatment. The performance goes up, the expenses come down. It's like we've really been able to leverage all of these relationships, and so we're kind of this massive little presence there in these certain markets where it's working really, really well.
And how long did it take you to get to that day 30 passive cash flow point?
It was about 3.5 years.
Okay.
About 3.5 years.
And now I'm curious, Matt, I'd love to ask this question to people who have gotten to that point. Is most people have this dream of getting enough passive cash flow or enough in the bank to where they don't have to work anymore. And what I found is that when people get there, they go, oh crap, what's next? I want to know what came up for you at that 3.5 year point when you had enough money where you didn't have to work anymore. I know you're still in the real estate business and now you share your knowledge with other people. What was that experience like where you finally were liberated from the job, from the necessity of working, and you had to figure out what was next for you?
Well, I'm human. I still want things, you know. I still want to travel. I still want toys. I still want to live in a nice neighborhood. And when I got started to hit that point in 3.5 years, I definitely pushed down all of my expenses. So, you know, I was driving a little beater car. I was living in a small little apartment, and yeah, I didn't go out. I didn't travel, so my expenses were really low. But then once I got there, then I started as I continued to increase my passive income, my lifestyle followed, so to speak.
Okay.
And so now I live in an awesome neighborhood and an awesome place, but I still want to live in a more awesome neighborhood. I'm ready to go to Malibu here at the end of 2014. And I'm not a big car guy anymore, so I'm cool with my little Ford Edge. But I love to travel, and I've got a 2.5-year-old, so I want him to have all the really cool things that I didn't get to have as a kid. And so I just continue to build the passive income. But you're right. When I hit that 3.5 year mark, and a lot of people if you're not there, you're not going to believe this, but I really did feel like, wow, that was easy. That was not that big of a deal. That wasn't that big of a deal. And it was just having that shift in mindset and taking actions correlate to that mindset. And it's actually a very quick journey, relatively speaking. I mean, 3.5 years compared to 35 years, the old fashioned way of doing it, you know?
Amen to that, brother. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people will hear something like this. They'll hear my success story. They'll hear your success story, or any of the people that we interview here on Freedom Fastlane. And they'll say, well, that's great, but I'm not you. You know, this won't work for me. Or a lot of times they get asked the question, hey, does such and such a strategy work? And it comes up of, I can't do real estate, or I can't start an internet business, or I can't, whatever it is. What do you say to somebody when they say, I can't do something, when you sat there 3.5 years in and said, man, that was pretty easy?
The old cliche, and it's such a cliche, and it's so overused and worn out that it's a shame, because it's so true. And I know you've heard it before. If you think you can, if you think you can't, you're right. And if there's always, if you keep this in mind, there's always somebody that has achieved what you want to achieve that started out in a worse position than you did.
Yep.
There's always somebody. You can always find someone who had it worse. I mean, you could just look at Oprah Winfrey and never have to look for another example again. You know, she just came from absolute squalor, and now she's one of the richest women in the entire world. And we're talking about just creating, $5,000 a month of passive income. I mean, if Oprah woke up tomorrow and found $5,000 of passive income was all she had, she'd probably kill herself. You know what I mean? So, or even if she had, 10 times that, she'd probably kill herself. So it's all relative. So it's, in the grand scheme of things, doing what I did just to get your start is not that big of a deal. It's not difficult. So yes, you can do it. And, since then, I've launched an online academy, Ryan, where I show people exactly how to do what I did. And my last 2 or 3 months of episodes, I've just done this wrap-up year-end review of all the people inside of the academy that got the great success. They've come from all walks of life. So it is duplicatable. And these are people that, one guy's, the most he'd ever done is bought his own personal residence, and he inherited a cleaning business from his father. He hated the business, and he wanted to go do something else, and he joined the academy, and now he's wholesaling. The numbers are sick. If I told you, it wouldn't even make sense. He's an exceptional story. He's making like $40,000 a month wholesaling property.
Great.
And just over and over again, I've got a bunch of examples, but that's an exceptional example. You don't need $40,000 a month to really turn your life around, right? And so anyone can do it. And, if someone else did it, why can't you? And if you got an issue with that, then you probably got to look deeper than the right business to start.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think the evidences around us for whatever we want to believe are there. So if you want to believe that you can't do something, you can find enough examples of enough reasons to not try. But if you believe that you can do something, you can find enough reasons to support that too. It's just, what lifestyle do you want, and what actions do you need to take on a consistent basis in order to achieve that result? But Matt, I'm curious, do you think that losing it all and still being okay, do you think that that actually contributed to your ability to go after something much greater?
It definitely gave me, yeah. When you're bagging groceries for $7 an hour and you're 34 years old, that could be looked at as rock bottom. And I know people have, been homeless and on drugs and stuff, and I would consider that much deeper than where I was.
We've had some of those people on the show, yeah.
Have you? Yeah. I mean, I'm not comparing my story to them at all, but they've picked themselves up, so why couldn't I? Is really how I looked at it, and having come from a place where, it was a 6-figure a month type income that we only had to split between 4 people, and down to $7 an hour, it was just like, whoa. Okay, so I did do it once. I can do it again. But I think no matter where I would have ended up, I probably would. I don't think I had to hit rock bottom, and I don't think anyone has to hit rock bottom. I think you just have to be dissatisfied with where you are.
Well, what I found is when I went through my period where I lost everything and had my do-over, was first I freaked out. Like you said, you did too. There was a lot of self-defeat. There was a lot of negative thoughts that happened. But after I was done beating myself up, it was kind of like, I'm still here. And I'm still the same person that I was a couple months ago. My bank account's just smaller. Well, if that's the case, then I'm really infinite and I can achieve anything. It took me a while to figure it out and boil it down into just that sentence. But when I found that I lost it all and I was the same person, all of a sudden I felt free to go after and do whatever I wanted, because I could go bet big and lose, and I know that I'm still the same person. It doesn't affect who Ryan Daniel Moran is. I'm still me, even if such and such a project doesn't work out. And I find that most people who haven't had that experience are holding on to their success so tightly that they end up sabotaging it, because they're strangling it from holding on to it so tightly, afraid of losing it, afraid of having to go bag groceries. You bag groceries, and guess what? You achieved a level of success that was way higher than what you previously had when you thought you were on top.
Yeah, I didn't have that distinction then. I certainly do now, and I can look at it from a much wiser perspective. But it's just, you mentioned, you could go watch a Tony Robbins video, who I was a big fan of and still am. And he talks about your motivators. What's really going to drive you to success? Is it going to be the pursuit of pleasure? Is it going to be, are you fleeing from the pain? And at that time, bagging groceries was painful to me. And I think that was my biggest motivator. I just knew that I don't like this. And after 3 months, 4 months of crying on people's shoulders and realizing that there'll always be a shoulder to cry on, but there's only going to be one person that's actually going to do it and do it for me, and that's going to be me.
I'm reminded of what Jim Rohn says. And Jim Rohn talks about there's many strategies to get a result that you want. If you want to make more money, you can demand a raise, wait for a raise. You can go on strike. You can wait for the government to change the minimum wage laws, all of which may work as strategies. But the one he recommends is becoming more valuable in the marketplace in order to achieve the result that you want. And that strategy tends to work for the most people. Matt, you did it in real estate, so I want to give you the chance to talk about your online academy where you teach that strategy.
Yeah, it's funny that this is the first time we've ever talked, and you just segued into that exact distinction and talking about my academy. And if you want to go to the academy, it's epicproacademy.com. But that's not really like what I want to touch on, what you just said right there, because I think that's really important. I'd heard 2 things that, one specifically, I was listening to a podcast, and this literally changed my entire business as far as a teacher goes. as far as an educator, is that how would your business change if you weren't compensated until your client got their desired result? And, I started the first year or so of when I was teaching how to invest in real estate. I was very much, well, this is how you do it. You follow step 1, follow step 2, follow step 3. And if you do that, you're going to get the result. And I thought that was a good way to do it. And then I had heard this distinction. I was like, okay, so I gave them step 1. How can I make sure that they actually complete step 1? And then once they complete step 1, how can I encourage them and get them to go to step 2? And it's another slight little shift, but it changed the way that I talk to people. It changed the way that I created my course materials. And that right there is just, I became of a greater value because I had that distinction. And because I became that bigger value, the Academy naturally just started to grow and grow and grow. So I think that's very important what you just said there. It's really the value that you can create. The book Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. The science of getting rich is to provide 10 times in use value that you ask for in monetary value.
Right.
And so I've taken that and just embraced that. Like, okay, I need to provide more and more and more. I'm asking, if I ask $500 for this year, I got to give them $5,000 of use value out of this just to start. And that's how I focused and built my business. And that's one of the bigger distinctions of why what I'm doing now is being so much more successful than I was in the music. I didn't have those distinctions. I was just like, let's make good music, put it out there and see who buys it.
Yeah.
And now it's just increasing your value, I think, is so important. Another thing that's really changed in my business is, we're sitting here, I'm talking, it's just a book show. This is our book recommendation show. The book Gary Vaynerchuk's The Thank You Economy. Mm-hmm. And his one distinction there that I've completely ran with it and has built my business, both my online business and my real estate business, is the more high tech your business gets, the more low tech your customer service has to become. And I didn't really understand that until he went and kept on elaborating on that. And, if we've all been where we had to call a customer service place, whether it was for a credit card or your cable company, and you go through that phone tree. And it's so annoying and irritating to go through that phone tree. And it's so annoying and irritating now when you have to actually speak to the phone tree, like you can't even push the numbers anymore. And then you get a response from your email where it says, from the company where it says no reply at suchandsuch.com. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, congratulations. You've done such a great job at removing all of the people from your whole process, but I'm one pissed off customer. You know what I mean? And so I've just taken all of those things and put them inside my business. And I think that all of those things have separated me from others. It's given me definitely an unfair advantage because I'm willing to take the extra time and employ people to make sure that people get to talk to people. And we've just created a greater value. So thanks, Ryan, for segueing into that, because those are some of the things I'm so passionate about inside of my own business and building my business that they've really made a difference.
Yeah, well, since you're having the book show, I'm going to have the Jim Rohn show.
Okay.
Where he says you don't get compensated for the time that you bring to something. We get compensated for the value that we bring to an exchange. It takes time to provide value, but we don't get compensated for the time. We get compensated for the value. So is it possible to provide $100,000 worth of value in an hour? The answer's of course. Mm-hmm. I've done it with clients before. You've done it in real estate before. It's simply the process of taking things where they're of lesser value to where they're of greater value. When you started in real estate, you worked with people who were willing to trade some of their equity for peace of mind. Mm-hmm. And to them, that was a valuable trade. For you, you could provide that, and it was easy for you to provide that, and you got value in the exchange of equity, cash, which then you took to someone else who saw an opportunity, and it's just an exchange of value. That's why I get frustrated when people think that there is a finite amount of wealth in the universe, or that rich people are greedy, or that you have to take advantage of people in order to get ahead. That's not true. You actually have to produce value. And when you do that, you're compensated, and the overall pie of value goes up rather than down. And that's why I'm passionate about teaching this stuff. And that's why you share stuff through your academy and through your podcasts.
Well said. Well said. Absolutely. You can certainly, you can make money, and you can make a lot of money for short term by not following that. But if it's a long-term business and you plan on doing this for the long term, and even if it's to a point where you want to build an asset to where you can pass it on and sell it, you hit the nail on the head. You have to provide value. And just with the internet, there's so much free information out there. So now you've got even a greater competition to increase more value. So I think it's a great exercise in becoming just an awesome entrepreneur when you look at your competition is Google. So what can I produce? What can I provide? What can I offer that provides a greater value than, what's out there available free? So,
well, Matt, thanks for continuing to spread that message, and thanks for hanging out with us today at Freedom Fastlane.
You bet. It's my pleasure, Ryan. Thanks.
I love what Matt and I talked about today, where you don't need $1 million in the bank. You don't need $10 million in the bank. All you need is enough passive income each month to last you 30 days. And that seems a lot simpler to most people when you break that down. I'm always amazed at how many different ways there are to earn passive income. My strategy has been slightly different than Matt's, but it's been to earn my money on the internet with internet businesses and to invest that money into cash producing real estate and to invest it into long-term dividend paying stock. That's my financial strategy. And for other people, it's slightly different. I talk about all of this at the blog at freedomfastlane.com and also at our live events, which you can find out about at freedomfastlane.com. Hey, it always helps us spread our message when you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and when you share the show with a friend. We get lots of referrals. That's where most people find out about us. And I really appreciate you spreading the word and spreading the message about Freedom Fastlane. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll chat with you soon.